Good morning. Boy, we are glad that you are here. I'm Stacy Smith, Deputy Commissioner with the Division of Elementary and Secondary Education. And up here with me is a very distinguished panel. We have, to my right here, we have Kurt Lane, who is with the he is the Arkansas Drug Director. And then we have Sean Willett, who is with he's a peer recovery specialist, specifically in Hot Springs. So we're glad to have him with us today. On this side of me, we've got James Dawson, who is with the FBI Little Rock Special Agent in charge. And we also have Jared Harper, who is the DEA Assistant Special Agent in charge. And the reason we're all here together today is because it is Opioid Awareness Day. And for K-12 schools, it's Red Ribbon Week. And so yesterday, while I was saying red ribbon, I had everybody upstairs laughing because when I would say it over and over again, I could not get my R's correctly. But I did a good job today, Red Ribbon Week. We actually, there's been a lot of work done on this event, and I want to take a moment to point out Suzanne and Kimberly and thank them for the work internally at the department and making sure that schools across the state were aware of the opportunity and the educational tools that are out there. 180 districts throughout the state have indicated that they will watch either Chasing the Dragons or the 7-day documentary this week, if not today. That's over 43,000 students in the state that are going to get the opportunity to see that and have those. So absolutely. This is a topic that many in this room have been personally impacted, whether it's through friends or family or individual struggles. And so we just want to raise up people and appreciate the folks in Arkansas who are working hard to address this epidemic that we have going on. So with that, we're going to, I believe, watch the movie first, and then we're going to take the opportunity then to be able to pepper these guys up here with some questions and talk about what we need to do in Arkansas to move forward. So thank you, guys. So again, Opioid Awareness Day, and I do want to take a minute and I want to thank the press because I think it's important that you're here and that there's an awareness piece to this. So I do want to thank you, and I also want to thank our partners with Arkansas PBS who helped make this 7-day film. Kurt, are you okay if we start with you with the question? I tried to pick the hardest one to start you with. Really, first off, if you just kind of tell us about your role in the Arkansas as the Arkansas Drug Director, and then, how your office is going about addressing the opioids in Arkansas.
Yes, thank you. My role is to oversee state-funded prevention, treatment, recovery programs in Arkansas, but truly the mission is about building collaboration, awareness, education. And with that aspect, and anything that we get involved with or any programs that we have all have that mindset in it. So that is whether it's prevention programs of going into the schools or educating doctors, medical profession, educating communities, to treatment. It's all about that educational component in almost everything we do.
Okay. Sean? First, I just want to acknowledge you, and I want to acknowledge other people in the room or those that were featured in 7 days, how brave it is to tell your story and what an inspiration and impact that you could have made to other people. So I want to acknowledge that first. So thank you.
Thank you.
So you have a very, yeah, absolutely. So in the documentary, you talked about 14 times. What was the turning point for you?
I would say that it was over the course of a lot of years and a lot of different things that happened. And I went to treatment, rehab 7 different times. I went to detox, I don't know how many times. So it was each time that I would make an attempt, I'd get a little bit closer. I think the last time was the last overdose that I had. It was in the middle of a Walgreens. And they didn't even get me out of the Walgreens before they brought me back, so like right there in the Walgreens, they gave me the Narcan and they ended up having to shock me. So the only thing I remembered is I woke up and tasted like a burnt metal taste in my mouth and was trying to figure out what was going on. So it was probably scarier than any of the other times that it happened.
Okay.
So it, you know, it made me feel like I really needed to make some long-lasting changes. So.
Appreciate that. And I know in your current role and the connections that you're making are you're connecting with people, so appreciate that. Appreciate the work and the role. Let's kind of switch over here to Jared and Jim and talk a little bit more about kind of the law enforcement side and your agency's roles in not only just combating opioids in Arkansas and your work and investigations, but how do you kind of approach this, either from the FBI or DEA standpoint? What is your role in investigations or prevention? Either one of you.
So, for the Department of Justice, and I'll let Jared answer on behalf of the Drug Enforcement Administration, but for the FBI, and I believe the DEA, we work very closely with one another as agencies. I think that people probably underestimate the size and scope of the illicit drug problem in the United States and in the world. Our efforts are highly complementary, and really the way that we work with one another has enabled us to make significant inroads in drug trafficking here in the United States as it makes its way into the United States. I think education is a key component to that. I know that the DEA and FBI, both DOJ components, have been active in educating our fellow Americans about the dangers of drug usage for some time. You can think back to when you were kids. There was the Just Say No campaign. There were a series of campaigns that followed on the heels of that. The latest, of course, is the Chasing the Dragon initiative here that's held in the state of Arkansas. Jared?
Thanks, Jim. No, the Drug Enforcement Administration has never seen a time in history where 257 people are dying a day because of an overdose. So we take this very seriously with our state, local, and federal partners by collaborating and coordinating, sharing resources and assets to fight this horrific animal that we're all trying to put our arms around. And by doing that, it's through intelligence with the FBI, with their subject matter experts. It's through surveillance, whether it's electronic, physical, aerial surveillance. But it's a all hands on deck coordinated approach that the DEA is taking to exploit, identify the most largest drug trafficking organizations all the way to overseas in Mexico, et cetera, to try and get in front of this this epidemic.
One of the things that, Jim, I think you actually said it in the movie or the show, was we can't arrest our way out of this crisis.
That's true.
And both of your agencies, you know, you're having that strategic piece on the law enforcement side, but how does education in K-12 or in higher ed, how do we play into that role?
So education is a key component, making people aware of the dangers of the use of illicit drugs, particularly now as fentanyl makes its way across the United States. Fentanyl is 50 times more potent than any other narcotic that's been used prior to the inception of fentanyl, and it will kill you. It's very dangerous for law enforcement officers to come into contact with fentanyl because they have not built up a tolerance to any sort of opioid. And if they come into contact with fentanyl, there's a high probability it will kill them. But we've made a lot of inroads, I think, with the American people, but maybe the part we haven't done as well as we should is explaining the violence that accompanies illicit drugs every step of the way. So from the inception of drugs, whether it's in a coca field in Colombia or in South America or the highlands of Mexico, whether it's a grow operation for high potency marijuana. Marijuana is much more potent now than it has ever been in the past. Whether it is putting together the components for P2P to be able to produce methamphetamine, whether it's assembling the components from overseas components into fentanyl, which commonly happens in clandestine labs. There's violence every step of the way. As it comes into the United States, there's violence associated with that. As it makes its way across the border and into distributors here in the United States, there's competition and violence associated with that. Finally, it makes its way to the end user. And in the case of fentanyl, overwhelmingly, the end state for people that end up using fentanyl is a much higher probability that they will die as a result of overdose. That's not going to just impact them, right, and kill them. It's going to have an impact on their families and on their loved ones. And the other thing that people don't pay any attention to is the level of violence that happens on our streets as a result of gangs who look to assert their right or privilege to traffic narcotics in their area of interest. And so if you're caught in the crossfire of one of these things, you're going to get killed, right? And we see it happen all the time. We see it all the time where innocent victims are killed on our streets. And they're killed on our streets because of competition over the trafficking of illicit drugs, which is based off of a demand which is created by people in the United States. There's no innocent person in this. But the truth is, we do not think that we can arrest our way out of this problem. And as a matter of fact, we don't think we know we can't arrest our way out of the problem. We don't want us to do that. You don't want us to do that. Instead, we want to gear our efforts towards those individuals that are trafficking narcotics, those people that are distributing. Those are not good Americans, right? Those are people that knowingly are hurting our fellow Americans. They are hurting our American family. And we are an American family. Don't forget that. We're one people. We're one nation. We're one body. We are one people. There's only two versions of people in the entire world, Americans and not Americans. And if you're an American, that means something. It means everything. It means you're a part of the American family. We can argue with one another, we can disagree, we can quibble, all right? But at the end of the day, we're still the American family. And people that harm the American family, like people that are distributing narcotics, knowing they're hurting the American family, those aren't good Americans. And those are the people that we're after.
So there seems to be, I'm going to come over here to you, Kirk, a little bit about the education prevention piece, because, you know, listening to you, I almost like there's this disconnect when we're thinking about prescription drugs and then this whole vast, you know, Mexico or, you know, other people coming into the countries and selling, and how that impacts. So it's almost like when we get into this opioid crisis and you're seeing that people are taking prescription drugs, they're not thinking about this side of it at all, are they?
No.
So on some of the programs and prevention strategies that you guys have done from your office, are we seeing anything that's working? Is there anything statistically that we have to say this is something we need to continue on with?
Sure. You know, it's kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, unfortunately. In 2019, our state realized that we were one of 5 states that actually actively reduced overdose death in the double digits. We were at 17%. We were one of 5 states. Yet in 2020, we increased to 55% increase, mainly due to COVID and the influx of illicit fentanyl into our state. And so it was a perfect storm, and we're still trending along those values. What we are seeing is our willingness to change in our program, in our mindset. For example, allowing people with lived experience, people that are in recovery, and we realize that recovery does work, allowing them to have a seat at the table to help us resolve those problems and break the stigma that we created as a society, putting it all on law enforcement to arrest our way out of this problem, and opening that mindset and bringing in new partners has been what we have seen to be the biggest success. And with that, I think we could really defeat this epidemic if we all just pitch in and try.
Right, so this awareness piece today and this discussion today is important.
It's a big part of it.
Yeah, so Sean, when we think about the law enforcement side and the prevention and education side of it, and you're working right alongside law enforcement now. That was something in the show that you made that quote. If they would have told you 3 years ago that this would have been what you were doing today, you wouldn't have believed anybody. How is that working? Are people bringing you in? Do they, when a police officer calls you or you show up to a visit? Are people sharing their stories with you and reaching out and calling you? What's working for you when you're working with people?
Yes, pretty much all those things that you just said. A lot of times they'll either come by the police department and ask for me, or they call me on my cell phone or the office number. We've had a lot of times where we'll go to follow up on an overdose that happened that was non-fatal, and he's doing, the investigator that I work with, he's doing his job, and we kind of go together. And when we get, it's funny because when we get there, the person that we're talking to is got their arms crossed and they're mad and they're like, I ain't talking to you, I ain't talking to y'all. And then when he gets done talking, then I talk to him, and then next thing you know, they're like telling both of us their whole life story and stuff. So it's pretty cool that I'm able to talk to those people, because I'm able to level with them. So.
Yeah, you're probably able to disarm them a little bit because they're like, oh, wait a second, I can connect with you. So I think that's powerful. As far as how are we working with local law enforcement, as far as your organizations and local departments of police departments?
I'll say that the DEA, every day, we work with 42 different state and local law enforcement partners through our task force agreements, and we can't do it without them. This is a family of law enforcement that we recognize that we have to use one another's resources, we have to leverage one another's assets, and we have to all work together in a coordinated effort, and that's what it's going to take. But we also have to engage with the community. We have to engage with the schools. We have to engage with the adult community. Whether it's youth engagement, media engagement. It's a workplace engagement, the peer recovery process, prevention. It's going to take all professionals in the state of Arkansas in order to get in front of this and stop everything that comes from it, whether it's the violence, and it's all one big circle of vicious cycle. That it starts with one, the drugs lead to the guns lead to the fighting over the money and the competition, which leads to the violence, is what we're seeing here in the city.
Wow, and the connections of it all. So I'm going to ask a real just naive question. So fentanyl, we've mentioned it several times within the show. You've mentioned it. Just in this, why is that drug being laced into everything? How is that even? I think that's just my own naivety.
It's incredibly cheap.
Okay,
so
and so
it's
that's
50 times more potent than heroin, and you can get enough fentanyl to kill you for about $4. That's all it takes. Less than the cost of a pack of cigarettes, you can kill yourself with synthetic opioid. That's it. All right.
So it's all about money.
Well, for the traffickers it is, but for individuals that take it, it boosts the efficacy and the effectiveness of other drugs. So they have to use a minute amount, which is very cheap, in order to get that high that they need. For those people that are addicted to it, it may be the only thing that is able to help them through their physical dependency upon that drug.
If there are people in the audience in a minute that have a burning question, just give me a wave or something. We'll make sure and ask that question. I'm going to come back over to you. I'm just keep putting you on the hot seat, don't I? A lot of the audience is K-12 today, and people in schools. What do you wish, or what would you have said to your younger self, or what do you wish somebody would have done earlier on that maybe could have changed something for you? And I know you mentioned that it was probably after high school when you started, but is there something that you wish you would have said to yourself then, or something someone would have done or stepped in earlier that could have changed it?
Well, I would like to just be able to have given myself some advice on some things, like that one day that I need to figure out what credit is, and that it's important, and to make that a priority, to maintain my credit. But I don't mean to sound cliche, but the person that I am right now, I'm very happy with. So I would hate to be, think about trying to go make changes. But,
Your experiences make you who you are today.
right.
And you're living a life testimony of helping others right now, so.
And I wouldn't be able to do that without the experiences that I've had, so.
That's true. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that. As far as the K-12 public schools and higher education and playing a role in that, I had asked kind of over here, what were some of the things about education that we could do in K-12? Do you have any tips for higher ed or K-12 that we might want to think about?
Sure. I think for a long time, and I know that we had previously mentioned it, that a lot of that mentality of what we were educating in our schools, especially K through 12, was about the just say no mentality. I think that needs to change, and we need to be willing to that change, because we realize, looking at statistics, that a lot of people that are overdosing are between 20 and 50 years of age, and those are our parents, and those are our guardians, and our people that are raising our kids and standing up as role models. So what are we teaching kids other than just say no? Because a lot of times when you go into the school, they know what's going on. They know what the different drugs are, probably more prevalent than we do. So should we work towards giving them coping models of how to help their parents and help that household so they don't become a drug-endangered child? And are we giving them the strength to speak out when they realize those problems, or are we hiding them, which fuels a lot of this problem and the stigma?
Okay. I think that's a good point. Is there anybody in the question? Beth, I see that you have a question back there.
Hello. My question is, a few of the people in the documentary, and I know people myself, who start out with a prescription and then it leads to the illicit drugs. What are we doing on the initial side of the prescription drugs that leads to the other?
Yes, ma'am. So the Drug Enforcement Administration does have diversion agents that work alongside us that do very closely monitor doctors, practitioners, nurses, pharmacists, etc. We're constantly looking for compliance, regulations, regulatory violations. We're steadily evaluating the data, looking at overprescribing, prescribing without a medical purpose. We follow up on all complaints that come into our office very thoroughly. And we're doing inspections of these different offices, whether it's a doctor's office or whether it's a hospital or whether it's a pharmacy. And we are looking at these regulatory and compliance violations and very seriously investigating them.
There's a law enforcement further law enforcement component to that as well. Everyone's probably heard of Purdue Pharma, right? So in my last job, I was special agent in charge of the criminal division, criminal and cyber division of the Washington field office. I led the investigation that resulted in Purdue Pharma reaching a settlement with the Department of Justice, and our asset forfeiture and seizure was well over $6 billion. So whatever we can do to continue to disincentivize big pharmacies or big pharma from pushing opioids on Americans, we'll continue to do that.
Okay. Come on up.
I think my question is related or dovetails on
Yeah.
that. I think my question is a continuation of the discussion. In the film, it was hard to tell the doctor who is administering the help, Jessaville, and I don't remember her name, but it wasn't really clear what kind of treatment the people who are attempting recovery were getting. And I know that I moved from California recently, and one of the things they do in California, I'm not familiar with what they do in Arkansas, but there are synthetic drugs like methadone and other treatments that are offered to people who suffered opiate addictions, and they're offered as a substitute. And my question is, are those in some way just creating another physical dependency, or do they really work? And what was that doctor doing? Was she putting people on other kinds of treatment plans to wean them off of whatever they were addicted to?
Good question. We'll let Ms.
So it's a
Ryan-
great question, and I think it's one thing that is being discussed very strongly in our state and around the nation. We do have prescribers that have pathways for people. And a lot of times when people are trying to find their way to recovery, we realize that we need to give them every pathway, what works well for them, and what works well for one may not work well for another. So having that pathway to get somebody to think clearly, and then once they're thinking clearly, finding that way to make abstinence or recovery is what I feel is our goal should be. But with that said, a lot of that issue has been for a long time that in our state, in 2017, we only had 75 prescribers that could provide what is known as medication-assisted treatment, MAT. And a lot of that, you had to travel 3 or 4 counties over to find somebody to give you that service. And so we've been trying to expand that, and everything, like I said, is about education and what we're doing. And I'm happy to say today we almost have 500 prescribers that are on board providing MAT to people in the state, yet we still have some counties that don't have any, and one of our goals is to at least have one in every county, because if people need help, you need to give it to them and not put them on a waiting list to get it.
Thank you. We are wrapping down, our time is kind of running out, but I do want to give the folks on the panel one last opportunity to share something, or if there was a point or something that you think, I didn't ask the right question for that to come out today, but that you think it's important for this audience and those who are watching via live stream to hear. I want to give you the opportunity to be able to share that. So is there anything over here, Jared, that you'd like to add?
I'd just like to say we, the DEA and all of my state, local, and federal partners, we're not going to stop fighting to protect our Kansans or Americans, the American people, from these predatory drug traffickers, and we'll use every resource at our disposal to do it. So I can promise you that. We are working very, very hard every day to try and put a stop to what we're seeing. But we need your help. And I'm convinced that the state of Arkansas is going to step up to the plate, because you wouldn't be here and we wouldn't have all these professionals coordinating and trying to get the message out, to include the media and everybody that's here today. So thank you for that, and keep up the fight, because we're going to win in the end.
Thank you.
So the Little Rock Field Office of the FBI and the resident agencies located in Fort Smith, Texarkana, El Dorado, Marion, Jonesboro, Fayetteville, and some offsite locations that we don't necessarily divulge, are all leveraged towards the war on drugs. Right? We're conducting investigations with state and local partners, with the Drug Enforcement Administration, in all those locations. Does anyone really know why the U.S. government is engaged in the war on drugs? Right? Is it some means to be punitive towards a segment of society? Is it to be mean to other people? No. The reason we have a war on drugs is we want to save American lives. That's the purpose of the war on drugs. Sometimes I feel like we've lost focus on that. We take that very seriously here in the state of Arkansas. Jared and I have had numerous conversations on ways that we can further leverage our abilities, how we can grow 21st century means and methods of combating a 21st century problem. We work together to combat the trafficking of opioids on the dark web. That's a new initiative that we're standing up. We're going to continue to bring our best efforts, along with our state and local partners, to meet this problem head on. We hope that we can do our best to serve our fellow Arkansans and our fellow Americans.
Well, I personally want to thank you, and I know the agencies would too, and the folks in this crowd, that you are really our first responders, and our police force, our local law enforcement, state agencies, because a lot of us are living our lives every day and we don't know the danger that you're putting forth. I mean, the danger that you're in, trying to prevent this by saving lives out there. So we do appreciate that. We'll turn to this side and see if you guys have a last comment or anything that you'd like people to know.
I really, truly believe that the resolve to this epidemic is collaboration. It's caring, compassion, connectivity, curiosity, and most importantly, courage. Courage to step up and do the right thing and appreciate each other and help each other.
I appreciate that. Sean?
I'm just hoping that we can normalize this type of discussion, because that's how we make changes. That's how we help these people like me, by not making it such a weird thing. Let's keep it a secret. Like, we should be comfortable talking about this kind of thing.
I think that's the perfect way to end, awareness piece. Make it normal that we can talk about it. I appreciate you those of you who came to be in the audience with us today, those of you who joined us through live stream. These gentlemen will be here for a few minutes. If you want to ask some other questions to them individually, you're more than welcome to do so. But again, thank you very much. Thank you, Suzanne and Kim, for putting this together for us. So appreciate everyone.